I guess what's most disappointing for me, being a journalist myself, is that so few journalists actually stand up for the profession.
Does it frustrate you as much as it does me that the journalistic community worldwide, and especially that here in the United States, that often boasts about journalistic independence, is not talking more about his plight?
What really angers me is the lack of outrage from the political class and the total absence of the mainstream media in actually speaking out about this. I mean, this is one of their own. This is a fellow journalist.
You'd think journalists would say something about this. Assange is, after all, one of them. What do you call a man who publishes news for a living?
Because he is, after all, an investigative journalist.
Almost no one in Washington, in the press corps, will stand up and defend Julian Assange as a fellow journalist who is facing some of the harshest conditions any journalist in the West is facing.
If you look at the French media, it's more neutral, I can say, because it's not so important case for us. But actually, it's wrong, because the French media, the French journalists should have defended Assange from the beginning, but they don't do it.
Because he embarrassed the U.S. government, and he embarrassed the CIA.
So it's the press that has failed the public here, and they have already, the corporate media I'm talking about, they have already destroyed themselves in many ways. And to vilify this man and to be cheering today his arrest is quite disturbing.
There was a time not so long ago, really, when reporters didn't applaud the arrest of other journalists for publishing information.
One of the things that absolutely astonishes me is that you see so many journalists around the world cheering this prosecution on because of their hostility to Assange.
Oh, man. Yo, that is one of the most embarrassing ways you could get arrested, because look at this. That's his head, and then those are his feet.
And that people are going along with it. I see people applauding this. It's sick.
They carried him out of the embassy like he was an old couch. It's just like, all right, watch the corners, watch the corners. Come on, watch the corners.
And yet, of course, what this is, at least as I read it, is an attempt to get round the protections to journalists provided by the law. And one would have thought the journalists, putting aside whatever feelings they may have about Assange, would see that as a direct attack upon them.
So if they're going to sit back now, the mainstream media in the West is going to sit back now and say that, oh, well, Julian WikiLeaks, it's all espionage and, he deserves what he gets. They are setting an incredibly dangerous precedent for themselves if they continue to report news produced by leakers and by whistleblowers.
Well, this is an example for all of you guys. If Julian goes down, the rest of you do.
The Committee to Protect Journalists has made that very point, by the way. So have various people like Glenn Greenwald, and every journalist should be concerned about this prosecution. It is a very serious case. It's been brought out of time. It alleges a conspiracy where the facts are incoherent and amorphous.
Because they will all be vulnerable. This will be an incredible precedent globally for what could happen to any publishing outfit anywhere around the planet. And they really need to think about this and to stand up for one of their own, a fellow journalist, a fellow editor, and a fellow publisher.
We should not look to media that already plays a role of conspiracy in an empire that is based on crime and that is based on secrecy.
Well, Julian Assange has committed the grave crime of exposing power to sunlight, which may cause power to evaporate if the population grasps the opportunity to become independent citizens of a free society.
And that is what they're trying to prevent, because they don't want their secrets to come out. They want to keep everything secret. They don't want us to know about their methods of torture or their incarceration of innocent people or. That's why they're going after Julian Assange.
And they're demanding that the corporate media, who's already totally housebroken, who's already defending in every way an empire that is declining, that's in decay, that no longer has credibility, The corporate media is very much, in the U.S., is absolutely part of that secrecy.
They don't want to talk about what he did. They want to talk about his character. I don't care one way or another about his character.
But to answer your question about the kind of character he is, he's extremely intelligent, extremely capable, extremely humorous, extremely self-deprecating, but also knows what he wants.
That it only makes it even the more disgusting when we see newspapers like The Guardian or the Daily Mail dancing on Assange's legal grave and saying what a horrible person he is. Because the issue here obviously is not whether he is a horrible person or whether you agree with him. It is a matter of media freedom.
And he doesn't agree with the way that the what we call the traditional media often operates. And that's what puts him in conflict with people like The Guardian at times.
Journalists, of course, are not supposed to be good. They're meant to be piss-weak on questioning stenographers who publish what we tolerate.
But the most important information that we, Julian Assange's fellow citizens of the globe, need is information about the secret malfeasance and wrongdoing of our governments, which are legend.
Why is the United States government so upset? Well, it's because Wikileaks has this unique capability to get leaks.
Wikileaks was producing things that people ought to know about those in power. People in power don't like that, so therefore we have to silence it.
All of this is Orwellian. All of this is based on keeping it all secret. That is the real crime that Julian Assange committed, refusing to allow the crimes to be held secret anymore.
The funny thing about revealing the truth about the empire, they don't like it. They don't like it. No, they don't. They get all pouty, and then they put a black bag over your head and strap a car battery to your nipples.
And that's, of course, what WikiLeaks did. They provided the information that the governments did not want the public to know, particularly about crimes and corruption.
Talk about transparency. That's synonymous with the WikiLeaks transparency. I don't see the same kind of transparency from the prosecution.
This is the kind of thing, the kind of scandal that takes place, unfortunately, over and over.
So I think we have to refuse to accept the secrecy and bring forward what we already know.
When we gave Julian Assange and WikiLeaks the Sam Adams Award for Integrity, that was October 2010, after he had released the Afghan and the Iraqi war logs. What did they show? They showed war crimes by the United States military.
And really what was exposed are the dark crimes that the U.S. has committed in its wars. 200,000 cables, video footage, images.
What was the reaction? Very little reaction to that. That was pretty much suppressed.
What was in those cables? Let's show again those videos.
So with Assange on the verge of being shipped here to be tortured, now is a good time to go through all of the incredibly important revelations from WikiLeaks. Let's start with the most famous one.
You know, the collateral murder video that Sarah referred to is very damning.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all remember, don't we, those horrendous images of Iraqi civilians being shot dead from a helicopter, which were part of the WikiLeaks revelations in the early years. I mean, genuinely shocking evidence of war crimes.
Showing us U.S. aircrew gunning down Iraqi civilians.
It shows the brutalization not only of journalists, two from Reuters, but 10 other people in plain sight. It shows the brutalization of the pilots.
And you can hear on the video, they were having a ball doing it. They were fucking loving it.
Come on, let us shoot. Come on. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
And two of the people they murdered were Reuters journalists. So you would think maybe Reuters, of all the media outlets, maybe Reuters would pry their head from their ass cheeks and fight for Assange's freedom.
Well, what's disturbing to me is what WikiLeaks used to be something that people on the left would cite as evidence that the military was out of control, or that the military-industrial complex is out of control.
And what is shocking, even though it has been exposed, as far as I'm aware, none of those soldiers have faced any charges.
0 people have been arrested for the collateral murders, yet Julian Assange has been arrested for revealing them.
And this is why they've got him arrested today. All the other stuff about bail skipping and previously about the sexual allegations in Sweden, all of that was to lead up to get him to go to this courtroom in Alexandria, Virginia, so he could stand trial for exposing the secrets of governments.
All these charges that he's meant to be facing in the United States are concocted. They're ridiculous. They don't apply. They're charges against a journalist and a publisher.
And so they've just trumped up all these charges based on him publishing war crimes. And that's really what this is. It's publishing war crimes and embarrassing the U.S. empire.
And you have to admit, that is a pretty dick thing for Julian to do. Come on, man. Just let us kill a few 100,000 innocent people without you all blabbing about it.
The U.S. administration of Donald Trump is profoundly embarrassed, as was its predecessor administration, Barack Obama, over the leaks of Chelsea Manning.
Show those videos again. Let's show again the torture. Let's show again Guantanamo.
WikiLeaks brought us the Guantanamo Bay procedures, showing that many of the prisoners were completely innocent and that some were hidden from Red Cross officials. Because, you know, when you're torturing innocent people, you kind of want to do it in peace and quiet, away from the prying eyes.
And in particular, furious that through WikiLeaks, these informations about human rights abuses and war crimes got a global international audience.
Let us torture some folks. Don't be a narc, man.
He's embarrassed the U.S. military-industrial complex. He's embarrassed the CIA.
None of the soldiers torturing innocent people at Gitmo have been arrested for it. Yet Julian Assange has for revealing it.
If they're going to pull Julian Assange out of the embassy, absolutely an outrageous crime, then let's show again all of their crimes. I think that can be the only response, the only legitimate response, is to show that there is no freedom of press.
There was also the Iraq war logs, hundreds of thousands of documents relating to America's illegal invasion of Iraq.
You're not upset if the people who are causing and ordering illegal wars or ordering war crimes to cover it up?
As far as I can tell, no one committing the war crimes evidenced in the Iraq war logs has been locked up for them. Yet Julian Assange has for revealing them.
What WikiLeaks and Julian Assange did by exposing US war crimes and human rights abuses in Iraq and Afghanistan was in the public interest.
But the problem now is the US administration has so many things, so many murders, so many mass murders, so many bad things they did to conceal.
DynCorp, a powerful defense contracting firm that claims almost $2 billion per year in revenue from the U.S. tax dollars, threw a party for Afghan security recruits featuring boys purchased from child traffickers for entertainment.
The Afghan War Diaries, which consisted of 92,000 documents related to our destruction of Afghanistan. It detailed friendly fire incidents and civilian casualties. It showed that when reporting their own activities, U.S. units were inclined to classify civilian kills as insurgent kills.
This is what we do. In Afghanistan, we're over there doing this in Afghanistan. We're exporting our values.
I'm unaware of anyone locked away for these war crimes, yet Julian Assange is for revealing them.
I'm actually genuinely curious about your relationship with him. War crimes need to be punished, and they haven't. The war crimes that he's exposed, no one's done anything about it, but they put him in jail to shut him up.
This is what it's come to. We're in the middle of illegal wars, and you're upset at the people exposing them?
What he's done is given the American people the right to know what their government is doing in their name, things that the U.S. government and military kept hidden.
Julian Assange embarrassed virtually everyone in power in Washington. He published documents that undermined the official story on the Iraq War and Afghanistan. He got Debbie Wasserman Schultz fired from the DNC. He humiliated Hillary Clinton by showing that the Democratic primaries were in fact rigged.
There's the DNC emails and the Podesta emails. The DNC emails showed us just how rigged the Democratic primaries really are. They proved media, financial, and organizational rigging in favor of the Hillary campaign. They even showed that Obama's entire first-term cabinet was selected by Citibank. Citibank! After being brought to court over this, by the way, the DNC's lawyers admitted the DNC has no obligation to have fair primary elections. It's their right to rig them.
Why does mainstream media worship the intelligence community so much?
Yeah, there's a big reason and a little reason. The big reason is they are giving legitimacy to an establishment that is losing legitimacy. As you pointed out earlier, Peter, that they are weak. And the corporate media props them up. They're an essential ingredient in that to keep people believing that these are legitimate rulers. And the second little reason is careerism, that reporters want to be close to power. They live vicariously through these powerful people. They want to be part of the elite. They don't understand their role is to be amongst the people, to challenge, to vet, to criticize the powerful. So that's exactly what Julian Assange did. So they're trying to abolish that and have full control over information. And here comes Assange publishing documents that they themselves hang themselves with because it's their own words. It's their own video.
But don't try to get angry over this, because if you do, the CIA has ways to fuck up your life.
What was the most recent damaging leak? It was something called a cyber tool by the CIA called World Framework.
Today, in fact, we published new important material from the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA Vault 7 Athena, a system to penetrate and spy.
In 2017, WikiLeaks posted a trove of CIA documents called Vault 7. It detailed their capabilities, including remotely taking over cars, smart TVs, web browsers, and smartphones.
So that's really damaging to the CIA. That's the most proximate reason why they're after him big time.
So is anybody at the CIA chained up for violating our privacy in every way they can come up with? No, but Julian Assange is for revealing it.
If Assange is extradited, the process will likely be lengthy, and there's going to be a lot of litigation on this issue of free speech, freedom of the press, as well as whether WikiLeaks, a website, really qualifies as a publisher, and whether Assange really is a journalist.
First question I have for you, Julian, is do you consider yourself a member of the press? Are you a journalist?
One of the difficulties that the government has always had with WikiLeaks is how to define it, because, you know, what journalists do frequently is receive classified information from sources and then publish it.
Assange has been nominated for multiple Nobel Peace Prizes, and nearly every respected media outlet around the globe has done some reporting at some point based on source material from WikiLeaks.
The Obama administration looked at and tried to bring charges against Julian Assange. They ended up deciding that they could not bring charges simply because how do you bring charges against Julian Assange when you don't bring charges against the New York Times and other news organizations that published those very same documents that were stolen and that were published by WikiLeaks.
Publishing of documents, of videos of killing of innocent civilians, exposure of war crimes, this is journalism.
Publishing information which is true. He's been publishing documents. He's been publishing secret documents, but he hasn't been publishing some narrative. He's just been literally publishing documents.
It's called conspiracy. It's conspiracy to commit journalism.
Assange didn't solicit this information from Bradley or Chelsea Manning. Manning offered it to the New York Times, offered it to the Washington Post. And they didn't want it.
People don't know about it because they're not told. But then Bradley Manning did approach major Western news outlets about the information that he had at that time, and they all said no. Then he went to WikiLeaks.
They did not leak any information. They published the leaks of Chelsea Manning, and they have the same status as a publisher, albeit an online publisher, as the New York Times and the Guardian newspaper in London, which also published those leaks.
Assange is no sleazier than many journalists in Washington. He's definitely not more anti-American. He's broken stories the New York Times would have won Pulitzers for, and yet many of his colleagues have disowned him.
WikiLeaks was considered a profoundly professional, excellent publisher. Now he's not even a journalist.
It's weird. It's weird, the shift in how people used to defend him and now no longer do. And nothing really has changed in terms of what he's actually done.
It's amazing how people have flipped. I guess it's because of their material interest, not because they have any integrity.
This is wrong. This is illegal. This is a journalist. And anybody who says, no, he's not a journalist, yes, he is.
Oh, please, wrote Alexia Campbell of Vox. Assange is no journalist. We know who he works for, meaning Russia. Julian Assange is not a journalist, explained Jelani Cobb of The New Yorker without actually explaining.
He's actually been attacked by many people who are journalists who supposedly should support him.
That's one distinction, I hope, between journalists and Assange.
It's the stenographers for power that criticized Julian Assange by not calling him a journalist. I mean, that is one of the great ironies of the time, okay?
Ken Delanian of NBC, who doesn't so much cover the national security state as write memos on its behalf, noted that, quote, many believe if Assange ever was a journalist, those days ended a long time ago.
Julian Assange has received several awards. In 2009, he was awarded the Amnesty International UK Media Award.
You know, the corporate media reporters, they continuously say he's not a journalist, and that's a key thing here. He's something else. Well, he's publishing documents, but he's written 3 or 4 books. He writes articles.
He was recognized with accolades such as the 2011 Martha Gellhorn Prize for Journalism.
And he's not a journalist? What is he then?
Well, I have been a member of the Australian Press Union for many years. I co-authored my first book when I was 25 and have been involved in setting up the very fabric of the internet in Australia since 1993 as a publisher.
So the question is, why is Julian Assange as a publisher being singled out for punitive action by the US authorities with this unwarranted extradition order?
Quite interesting that this is something that has been raised. It's actually a quite deliberate attempt to split off our organisation from the First Amendment protections that are afforded to all publishers.
Why is he being singled out, and why is the New York Times and the Guardian newspaper not also facing charges in the US courts?
Remember, Assange just received the leaks. That would make him a reporter. That would, by the way, much better journalism than almost anyone else in this country, right?
That's it. He has received information that the government doesn't want published and put it out on the internet. So how do you define what he's doing as different from what Bob Woodward at the Washington Post does, or the New York Times does, or CNN does?
I now even in a position where I'm managing the interrelations between Guardian, Spiegel, New York Times, Al Jazeera, and so on.
Many people say that he's a journalist. Some say that he's a militant. Others say he's an opportunist. Others say that he's fighting for the rights of the press.
I mean, people call him a whistleblower. He's not. They call him a hacker who hacked the DNC. He's not. What he is, what Julian Assange is fundamentally, is a publisher. He provides a high-tech conduit for news outlets, and for whistleblowers particularly.
Well, I don't think it's really important to place him in any of those descriptions, because if we start placing Assange as being a journalist or an activist or somebody who's a militant, then we miss the point of the work that he does. As a journalist, which is what the High Court has described him as, and he's won many journalistic awards, I mean, that will do. The argument that he needs to be a certain kind of journalist really does, I think, miss the point.
So, yes, unfortunately, I don't write that much anymore because I'm busy being editor-in-chief, coordinating the actions of other journalists.
This man just isn't just some kind of clerk accepting the documents and putting them out there. He understands what they mean, and he tries to explain what they mean.
That's journalism. So what they have done is recognizable, I think, this time to all journalists that they are in the crosshairs of this one.
He's done journalistic work. He's recognized as being a journalist. The important point to remember is if you take away Julian Assange's journalism or the fact that he's a journalist, you remove one of the major credentials that he has that defends himself against the espionage in the United States.
What Julian Assange was doing was not illegal.
This is straight journalism.
I mean, he's a legitimate journalist in that regard. I mean, what he's doing is he's distributing information that is literally going to change the way people view the way the government and the military works.
Surely that is no different to the newspapers who then published what was on WikiLeaks. Maybe they should all go to the United States and be tried under United States law. I mean, where does this one stop?
If this is the standard, then indictments should be made against the Washington Post, the Guardian, CNN, all the rest of them, okay? Because that's what publishers want. They want more.
They mentioned, for instance, that he solicited investigative material. He solicited classified information. Terribly. He didn't just passively receive it over the transom. I can't count the number of times I've been solicited for classified information.
So, you know, we are in a situation of the most breathtaking hypocrisy.
Because it's the Espionage Act that if you're a journalist, you can publish material without suffering the consequences of it. You're protected to a certain extent. Stripping him of his title of journalist has always been the objective.
Why are journalists attacking Julian and saying he's not a journalist?
To split us off from the support of the press in the United States, the support of journalists. Some of those journalists have fallen for that. And why? Because they're worried that they're going to be next.
To keep their jobs. That's why.
Because they're just stenographers for power. And they're paid a lot of money to do it. And they seem to do it without any moral compass whatsoever.
Mostly newspapers now are about making money. There is no such thing as a journalist any longer. They're content providers. And whether it's true or not doesn't really seem to matter either.
Because if they express opinions that go against the narrative of the powers that be, word filters down, and one way or another they suddenly find that they're not getting the plum job, they're not getting the promotion, they're not getting that. Your job is on the line if you stand up to them.
And they cannot tolerate this. They need these lackey reporters to prop up their legitimacy that is weakened by the truth, in this case by Assange.
I have a message to them. They're going to be next. And we've seen these statements that the New York Times is you know, not also being looked at in terms of whether it has engaged in what they call conspiracy.
And again, it is well understood by the powerful that lifting the veil may cause power to evaporate. It may even lead to authentic freedom and democracy if an aroused public comes to understand that force is on the side of the governed.
And Julian Assange and people like Julian Assange have said, no, there is something to see behind the curtain.
You know, it's not just the big data dumps from the American government. It's not just the collateral murder snuff video that he released in 2010 that really kick-started this American witch hunt, but also against corporations around the planet, against British political parties.
WikiLeaks has helped create movements around the world, like the Arab Spring and Occupy. And don't forget, at first, WikiLeaks and Assange were celebrated for it by the mainstream outlets. In 2011, Amnesty International hailed WikiLeaks as one of the Arab Spring catalysts.
The WikiLeaks publications included material that Amnesty International credited WikiLeaks on Tunisia that sparked the Arab Spring and democratic revolutions.
The Guardian wrote, "The year 2010 may well be remembered as a watershed year when activists and journalists use new technology to speak truth to power. It is also the year when repressive governments face the real possibility that their days were numbered."
It's changed the way we think about journalism and the right to know.
Whatever election integrity movement there is right now owes a lot to those revelations by WikiLeaks.
I mean, his mission has always been very clear, to expose and impose transparency on those in power. And of course, in the West, we've seen particularly an increasing resistance to having transparency imposed on them, but an increasing desire to impose transparency on all the citizens by spying on us.
So why did so many outlets and people turn against Assange and WikiLeaks? Because it turned out he wasn't only revealing repressive Arab regimes, he was also revealing U.S.-backed coups and war crimes around the world. He exposed the criminality and villainy of the American ruling elite.
Exactly. This is politics through smear. I mean, all of these people that are criticizing him on both sides of the Atlantic, they refuse to comment on what he actually did reveal war crimes and corruption.
Now to another major award ceremony which was held last night, the Wikileaks, which recognises excellence in journalism.
Over the weekend, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange accepted the award for the most outstanding contribution to journalism at the 2011 Walkley Awards. The Australian Walkley Awards are the most prestigious awards for excellence in journalism in Australia.
The whistleblower website Wikileaks won a Walkley for outstanding contribution to journalism. The site's founder Julian Assange appeared in a special video. He praised the Australian media industry but said the Gillard government must not be afraid of the Fourth Estate.
The Gillard government has shown its true colours in relation to how it's handled US pressure on WikiLeaks.
Today marks the first anniversary of Cablegate, when WikiLeaks began publishing a trove of more than 250,000 leaked U.S. State Department cables.
This award is a sign of encouragement to our people and other people who labour under difficult conditions in this task. Our lives have been threatened. Attempts have been made to censor us. Banks have attempted to shut off our financial lifeline.
Glenn Greenwald, the significance of this award and WikiLeaks' significance overall.
There's no question that the award is justifiable. Here you have WikiLeaks, which is deservedly so, winning the equivalent of the Pulitzer Prize for its, and not just a prize, but the top prize in this for this foundation, which is outstanding contribution to journalism, winning this award for its outstanding journalism and shedding light on the political and corporate factions and how they function. And what is the United States doing? Using every extra legal and extrajudicial means possible to destroy them, talking about prosecuting them, putting them in prison, cutting off their funding, and I think it shows the true nature of America's political class in the same way.
We, journalists, are at our best when we share with activists and lawyers the goal of exposing illegality and wrongdoing, when we help to hold others to account.
I want to reiterate over and over again, everything was authentic. Unlike the major news outlets that dominate the Western world.
Keep in mind, nothing WikiLeaks has ever published has been proven false. Compare that to every other cable news sack of garbage you see. Compare that to every New York Times headline that I hold up, every Washington Post vomit. Compare that to Donald Trump's endless lies or Nancy Pelosi's utter horseshit.
WikiLeaks at the end of the day is a publisher, but unlike other publishers, it was never proven to be peddling fake news.
It's a worry, isn't it, that the rest of the world's media is doing such a bad job that a little group of activists is able to release more of that type of information than the rest of the world press combined.
Julian Assange is the most accurate human being to ever live, and he's in prison.
This guy run around telling the truth. Ugh, out there spreading truth everywhere.
Journalists who expose abuses face arrest, while those who commit the abuses do so with impunity.
When the American people are denied the truth, the facts about what the US government and the US military are doing in their name, then it is commendable that someone like Julian Assange exposes that.
Yet so far, it's only the reporters going to jail.
This case is all about freedom of the press. WikiLeaks and Julian Assange are online publishers. They have a right in American and international law to publish the truth. And that's all they did. They published the truth.
Yet after all this, and after 7 years in captivity, the man who laid bare these criminals and showed each one of us our chains, he and others who helped him reveal the truth are the only ones endlessly punished. But I'm right. That's true. It's true.
The major news outlets no longer perform a journalistic purpose. Their purpose is to maintain and further official narratives.
The media today, the big corporate media, is absolutely losing its legitimacy in terms of its hold on people's minds, on people's consciousness.
As a journalist everywhere in the world, the example to follow is the Watergate, because it was a question of sending Nixon out of the function of president. But no, this example is no more followed by anybody.
We have to say this media has no legitimacy.
WikiLeaks came into existence because the media failed. The legacy media failed in its mission to inform the people of hard truths and showing how government works and doesn't work.
We saw that when The Guardian, which of course originally published some of the WikiLeaks documents, then agreed to sit down with the secret intelligence services of Britain, otherwise known as MI6, and to destroy together in front of the officials of MI6 their hard drives containing this information. That act confirmed that The Guardian is an MI6 newspaper. It's an MI6 outlet. A number of its journalists work for MI6 and produce narratives concocted by the British government.
I think it's a great danger to us all. We had a raid on the ABC in Sydney just the other week, where I used to work as a reporter for Four Corners. And that raid, I would suggest, would not have taken place in a different climate. The climate is that the national security state, for want of a better word, is now feeling emboldened to step into newsrooms and go through reporters' files and go through emails on fishing expeditions looking for information.
And so it's up to us, the alternative media, to make sure that this doesn't go down lightly.
So us journalists and publishers and writers, we all have to stick together to resist this sort of reinterpretation of the First Amendment.
Let's not attack the messenger, let's look at the message.
The third award goes to Julian Assange.
Very happy to identify and receive the prize on behalf of Julian Assange.
So why all the hostility to Julian Assange? Well, we'll let former Democratic staffer and current CNN anchor Jim Sciutto explain. Assange's real sin was preventing Hillary Clinton from becoming president.
He is central to several cases. He's central to Russian interference in the election. U.S. intelligence views him as a middleman, a cutout, that he was in effect part of this interference.
Pretty much everyone in Washington has reason to hate Julian Assange. Rather than just admit that straightforwardly, he made us look like buffoons, so now we're sending him to prison. Instead, they're denouncing him as, you guessed it, a Russian agent.
You are very clearly quoting from WikiLeaks, and what's really important about WikiLeaks is that the Russian government has engaged in espionage against Americans.
Then, because they feel like somehow or another WikiLeaks was involved in helping Trump, they became a Russian mouthpiece and a traitor.
The fact is that the population has been misinformed, disinformed, distracted about the significance of this issue. Now, it's the press that has destroyed itself in many ways in this story, because they have turned on this man that they once profited from when it served their partisan interests, when he exposed crimes of the Bush administration. When he exposed corruption with Hillary Clinton, they turned on him in a dime.
Well, if you watched a lot of the coverage of this story today on television, you likely came away with the understanding that Julian Assange is some kind of Russian spy who's in trouble tonight because he stole classified documents from the U.S. government. That is not true. It's factually incorrect.
They're still pushing this rubbish story that he helped Trump get into the White House, that he's somehow a Russian stooge and a Kremlin agent, and all this nonsense, even though collusion story has collapsed.
Quote, Julian Assange has long been a wicked tool of Vladimir Putin and the Russian intelligence services, wrote professional moralizer Ben Sasse, who also serves in the U.S. Senate. He deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison.
I watched all of the American cable, with the exception of Tucker Carlson on Fox News. All of them, almost without exception, are trying to reignite the Russiagate hoax, okay? the connection between Assange and the Russians. There is no one scintilla of evidence that that ever happened.
There is no proof that he is working for the Russian government or ever has worked for the Russian government.
They have hacked American websites, American accounts of private people, of institutions. Then they have given that information to WikiLeaks for the purpose of putting it on the internet.
Okay, so once again, just to be totally clear, no one has ever shown that Julian Assange is a Russian agent. The indictment against him today does not say that. It doesn't mention Russia at all.
Justice should come to Julian Assange for his role in Russian meddling in our election, and the sooner the better.
But that has not stopped virtually every politician in Washington from repeating Senator Blumenthal's line, including many Republicans. Robert Mueller nearly killed the Russia collusion hoax. Julian Assange is allowing them to keep it alive.
This has come from the highest levels of the Russian government, clearly from Putin himself, in an effort, as 17 of our intelligence agencies have confirmed, to influence our election.
U.S. intelligence agencies later concluded Russia had delivered the data to WikiLeaks in an effort to discredit Hillary Clinton, a charge Assange has denied.
Keep that statement in mind when I read you the official statement from Russia this morning, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, on this arrest. They say the hand of democracy squeezes the throat of freedom.
Julian Assange, who normally doesn't comment on WikiLeaks whistleblower sources, said the leaks about DNC attempts to destroy the campaign of Bernie Sanders did not come from Russia. Why does it continue to be repeated in your media more or less every day that WikiLeaks was from Russia?
Because they don't want to talk about the information that was revealed by WikiLeaks. So that's the thing you'll notice in the United States media. They never talk about the contents of the WikiLeaks revelations. They only talk about how it was connected to Russia and how Trump and Russia and Putin and Julian Assange are all somehow colluding together, yet they can't get any direct evidence after 3 years of investigation.
A federal court ruled that there was no Russian connection with Julian Assange, that he had constitutional rights to do as he did as a journalist and as a publisher, and that has been completely ignored.
WikiLeaks also unveiled hundreds of thousands of U.S. State Department cables that showed more clearly than ever how our secretive government rules their empire with little to no input from the American people. The cables revealed Secretary of State Hillary Clinton ordering diplomats to spy on French, British, Russian, and Chinese delegations at the UN Security Council. It also showed Arab nations urging the U.S. to strike Iran.
You're not upset at the people who are crashing our economy and ripping off pensions?
Our ruling elite, of course, view this as a massive breach of national security. That's understandable. But that worldview only comes into play if you think the elites are the only ones who should know how our nation is run.
Throwing veterans out of their own houses while enriching themselves. You're not mad at any of the criminal stuff that's happening in them. What you're upset about is the guy who exposes the criminal corruption.
For all that was unveiled in the State Department cables, no one has been locked up. But Julian Assange has for revealing it.